Can we start? They will tell us. Chat. Can you see what is in the chat? Good afternoon to everybody from Harare, and of course in other time zones it would be good morning. UNESCO is very pleased to have this African regional launch, but just maybe a little housekeeping rules. Our launch is going to be conducted in French, English, and Portuguese. So if you see the globe in your screen, please press what is the appropriate language you will be listening to. So just as a very important housekeeping rule, we have interpretation in Portuguese and French. So please press the appropriate button, the French flag for French and the Portuguese flag for Portuguese. And if you have any questions and answers, please feel free to write in this Q&A. We are now in our new normal of having technology, and of course we have very uneven competencies in managing this technology. And we are very pleased that amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, which has preoccupied us for several months now, almost a year in fact, we are able to have this launch, this activity, Education for Sustainable Development, which is actually very related to the pandemic, the way we live our world, the way our consumption patterns. But without further ado, let me call on, we're very happy to have our Director of the Regional Office for West Africa, Dr. Dimitri Sanga, to be able to welcome us. Thank you, Dimitri. Over to you.
Thank you, Caroline, for this introduction, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on from where you are hooked up to this meeting. My brother, Dr. Mahama Wedraogo, Acting Director, Human Resources, Science and Technology of the African Union Commission, distinguished participants from regional economic communities in Africa, the chairs and secretary general of UNESCO national commissions, expert and implementing partners in the field of education for sustainable development and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really a pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of Ms. Stefania Giannini, UNESCO Assistant Director General for Education, to this regional launch of Education for Sustainable Development for 2030 roadmap. This launch provides an excellent opportunity for participants from all over Africa and beyond, working in the field of education for sustainable development, to connect, to reaffirm its importance and discuss ways to strengthen our related effort in these challenging times. We have come far since the world has chosen to prioritize education for sustainable development, with UNESCO as the lead agencies for the United Nations. Today's launch builds on the effort made during the UN decade on education for sustainable development between 2005 and 2014, and the Global Action Program called GAP on education for sustainable development from 2013 to 2019. In particular, the 5 years of the GAP was a part of the effort to achieve the 7th target of Sustainable Development 4 on education that specifically addresses education for sustainable development and related approaches. During the 5-year period of the GAP, an annual Education for Sustainable Development Prize was established with a view to encourage countries to heed the call to scale up action for education for sustainable development at all levels as a means of implementing all the 17 SDGs. This prize was funded by the government of Japan and known as the UNESCO Japan Prize on Education for Sustainable Development. The prize consisted of 3 annual awards of 50,000 US dollars for each recipient and awarded for the first time by the UNESCO Director General in November 2015. Subsequently, for each GAP year, Africa has had 4 awardees, of which we are extremely proud. In 2016, Cameroon became the first country in Africa to receive the award. The prize went to the Center for Community Regeneration and Development for its program called Integrated ESD Schemes. This is a civil society organization based in Cameroon with a United Nations special consultative status. In 2017, a Silengeni primary school received the prize for its permaculture program. The primary school is located in the arid Umzingwane rural district of Matebelela land, a south province of Zimbabwe. The school has 17 teachers and 738 students, whose parents are mostly subsistence farmers with a very low income. In 2018, Namibia joined the African laureates with the Namib Desert Environmental Education Trust, a Namibian non-governmental organization education based in the beautiful Namib Desert. The prize was awarded for its Center on Namib brand that reached out to over 25,000 Namibians annually. As the GAP period came to an end in 2019, Botswana became the 4th laureate from Africa. The Camp Hill community, a trust from Botswana, was recognized for its school and community-based integrated learning for living and work program, which offers services for youth with intellectual and development disabilities who are not able to attend mainstream education programs in the country. The prize and all award winners have been recognized, showcasing the role of education in connecting the social, economic, cultural, and environmental dimensions of a sustainable development. Distinguished participants, given the expression of a desire by countries to address the unfinished business of the Global Action Plan, in November 2019, the 40th session of the UNESCO General Conference adopted a new global framework for ESD called Education for Sustainable Development toward Achieving the SDGs, or ESD for 2030 in short. The focus is to support effort to equip learners with the knowledge, skills, values, and attitude needed to contribute to a more inclusive, just, peaceful, and sustainable world. The ESD for a 2030 roadmap developed by UNESCO provide guidance for member states and other stakeholders for the implementation of ESD for 2030. As the UNESCO World Conference on ESD was postponed from June 2020 to May 2021 due to the COVID pandemic, UNESCO is organizing this regional launch event to highlight regional progress and discuss the way forward in implementing ESD in our countries. The new ESD for 2030 framework and its roadmap calls for a stronger leadership by member states to mainstream ESD in their education systems and sustainable development policies and practices, and aspires to multiply concrete action taking at country and local levels. In line with the new orientation of the ESD, UNESCO Dakar, for example, aims to strengthen ESD action on the ground. Our office is supporting the process in integrating disaster risk reduction in the Gambian national curricula and is planning to work with Cabo Verde to encourage children, youth, and community members to collaborate on designing and implementing locally relevant projects that tackle the problems and conflicts facing their beach environment through the Sand Watch method. Distinguished participants, to end my welcoming remarks, let us always remind ourselves that the Africa region as a whole has a very young population, with over 60% of it being under the age of 25. The focus on the ESD for 2030 is in tandem with the African Union Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, which promotes opportunities for children and youth to learn skills and contribute to sustainable development. In light of the urgent challenges such as climate crisis that threaten our very survival, what we teach and how we teach them holds the key to our future. Let us make bold choices to transform our education, to transform our future. Again, on behalf of Mrs. Giannini, UNESCO Assistant Director General for Education, I wish all of us fruitful discussions. I thank you. Je vous remercie. Obrigado. Over to you, Caroline.
Thank you very much, Dimitri, for your warm welcome, and maybe to let our participants understand what exactly the 4 prize winners have been doing. We have a very short video clip to show what the work of these 4 countries have been. Sorry, we have some technical problems.
Prize this year. It's awarded for its
projects that practice education for sustainable development, or ESD, in an innovative and exceptional way. Every year, it is awarded to 3 organizations or individuals from around the world.
The UNESCO Japan Prize showcases outstanding, innovative programs in the field of education for sustainable development, or ESD. Congratulations to the Camp Hill Community Trust from Botswana for winning the prize this year. It's awarded for its integrated learning for living and work program, which empowers youth who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. A 4-year outcome-based training allows learners to follow individual education plans according to ability, interest, and personal goals. The integrated experience of environment, society, and economy helps participants not only learn practical skills such as crafts and permaculture, but also develop confidence in making informed choices and decisions.
Nadeet was chosen for its Nadeet Center on Namib Rand. Located deep in the Namib Desert, it offers hands-on immersion in ESD for school children, educators, parents, as well as for entire community groups. Focusing on energy, waste, and water, Nadeet also helps young people overcome poverty. Visitors learn firsthand about biodiversity, a sustainable lifestyle, and the balance between humans and nature. Learning means not just seeing and hearing, but doing and living. Nadeet Center has already hosted and trained over 13,000 children and adults.
I feel very amazed. I learned how to save energy, how to save water, how to cook on a solar panel. It's very exciting, and I have to learn new things and to teach others about what I have learned here at Nadeet.
Sikanani Primary School receives the prize for its permaculture program, which empowers its students and teachers with life skills to mitigate environmental challenges. Located in an arid region of southern Zimbabwe, Sikanani implements permaculture through a participatory whole institution approach involving the local community. The students, mainly children of low-income subsistence farmers, learn how to manage land profitably and sustainably. They conserve water, plant grass and trees, and introduce ground cover to reduce land degradation and deforestation. After leaving school, many go on to form small-scale businesses.
I've learned a lot about water harvesting and land use through crop and animal husband. I've been able to show my parents how to produce high yields using a small piece of land, and this has changed our life.
The Centre for Community Regeneration and Development is awarded for its programme Integrated ESD Schemes in Schools and Communities in Cameroon. This civil society organisation empowers people in marginalised communities socially and economically while fostering environmental sustainability. The youth-led programme works both in public schools and through informal community learning centres. ESD educators give training to children, youth, women, and indigenous groups on themes as diverse as leadership, health, family planning, information technology, and climate change.
It's now possible to see within communities more than 10,000 of women having to know their rights.
Thank you very much. As you can see, in Africa, we have a very rich experience on education for sustainable development. And so we have a very sound base to start and implement more the new ESD framework. We are very pleased to be joined by a representative from the African Union. Dr. Mahama Wadrago is the Acting Director for the Human Resources, Science and Technology from the African Union Commission. And we're very pleased that amid his busy schedule, he is able to join us. Please, Dr. Wadrago, please. Over.
Thank you, Caroline, Madam Moderator. It is indeed a pleasure for me to attend this meeting. My name is Dr. Mahama Wadrago. And for the record, I am the director of the Human Resources, Science and Technology Department, not the acting director. Dr. Dimitri Sanga, the director of UNESCO Office, West Africa. I also want to recognize Ms. Anne-Therese Jata, the director of UNESCO Office in Nairobi for East Africa. It is also my pleasure to recognize the African experts, the African expertise coming from the different Ministry of Educations, as well as the distinguished participant to the virtual launch of the Education for Sustainable Development Roadmap. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greeting from the Commissioner of Human Resources, Science and Technology, Her Excellency Professor Sarah Anyang Akpo. And of course, the Commission is really delighted to be invited to this meeting. As you are aware, this week, Monday, we reinitiated the AUC UNESCO Joint Commission. And as we are still also under the effect of the protracted COVID-19 pandemic that is affecting the world, sometimes we wonder to what extent is our responsibility as humankind to some of these calamities the world is facing more and more. Our response to such a question will legitimize or not the need to rethink our way of life, our interaction with the nature and its resources for today and of course tomorrow. This is about preserving the environment. Today we are here to launch the Education for Sustainable Development Roadmap in the African region. And we want to thank UNESCO for this initiative and also for inviting the Commission to this important event. This is an opportunity for all experts to internalize this roadmap, which call upon member states, regional and global stakeholders to develop activities on the 5 priority areas as follows: advancing policy, transforming learning environments, building capacity of educators, empowering and mobilizing the youth, and finally, accelerating local level action. When I go through this priority, I can't help but be reminded by Agenda 2063, this continental agenda, which of course calls in several ways to ensure that most of these aspects are really taken into account for African development, the Africa we want. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the huge challenges African education is facing, this sector is and will remain the only hope for Africa to provide to its people its identity, or their identity, the sense of belonging to the local and global community, and of course, it will give it the capacity to leapfrog thanks to this qualified human capital and ensure the livelihood and dignity in life away from the scourges such as hunger, pandemic due to infectious diseases, and of course, protection of the environment. As stated by Nelson Mandela, education is definitely the best way, the best weapon to transform the world, and in a peaceful way. Indeed, Agenda 2063 considers education as a prerequisite for attaining the 7 aspirations of the African people. In line with that philosophy, the head of states adopted the Continental Education Strategy for Africa as the continental blueprint for the development of education in Africa, as well as the African domestication of the Sustainable Development Goal 4, and Global Education 2030. The strategy provides the framework for reorienting Africa's education and training systems to meet the required knowledge, skills, and creativity for achieving Agenda 2063 aspiration and the SDGs. The Commission developed the CESA Indicators Manual with the aim to measure progress on its 12 strategic objectives. An effort has been made to ensure that these indicators are consistent with SDG 4. The evolution of the SDG 4, especially with the addition of the Education for Sustainable Development, has it emanated from SDG target 4.7, which uses some of the fundamental required for our understanding of the environment and the associated science in pursuit of its protection in a sustainable way through education, resonates well with CESA. The African stakeholders, therefore, need to further domesticate the roadmap by making the necessary adjustments so as to couple development and protection of the environment. Africa presents a huge opportunity for implementation of the Education for Sustainable Development, in a sense that it may be the right time when the region as a whole is not really a major contributor to the degradation of the environment and the climate change that follows, or other calamities, but rather a victim of their effects. The example of the gap, as outlined by Dimitri and the different countries that were able to win these different prizes, Botswana, Cameroon, are all a testimony to that. It is therefore possible to change the trajectory, to rethink on what a sustainable future is by joining learning to socio-economic development, particularly at the local level. That's where the footprint of education can be more felt and be very effective. How do we learn the knowledge, the skills, value, and attitude that can enable us all to make informed decisions and take individual and collective action on local, national, and global urgencies, as stated in the ESD roadmap? We believe that African heritage, its traditional knowledge, will therefore be asset to realizing this opportunity and achieve the required changes. However, we will all agree that achieving such a change, as we are moving toward the year 2030, may, however, require more than a paradigm shift. We need to move from the rhetoric to action, as we are not short of frameworks or strategies, which for the most part can be repetitive, rephrasing the same idea or philosophical approach in a different way, and all this due to the shortcoming of the required action to lift Africa to the next level. This launching meeting today is taking place when we are near halfway of the first 10 years of Agenda 2063, and a third of the lifespan of the SDG itself. CESA itself is halfway. With Agenda 2063, we have developed the medium-term plan. The chairperson of the African Union Commission launched the 1 million by 2021 initiative in 2019, has an opportunity to transform the education system to effectively respond to the skills need of the African market, to document the success stories and address the learning crisis Africa is facing. We should be bold enough to look in the mirror and ask if you have done proper stock taking, or are we running from one framework to the other? In any case, more purposeful and dedicated leadership will be very much useful. There is a critical need for joint implementation and coordination in order to avoid duplication efforts and resources. It's important that overlaps and duplication are identified and removed, and the gap that makes the specificity of CESA also be addressed. As we are launching this roadmap, let's use it as an opportunity to promote shared understanding of responsibility and move into concrete and concerted action. The African Union Commission adopted the clusters-based approach towards CESA implementation. The cluster constitutes an institutional platform for stakeholders' engagement and serve as a means of operationalizing the CESA strategic objective. They are intended to provide a platform for mobilizing, coordinating, harmonizing, and synergizing the effort and action of key partners to accelerate CESA implementation. Furthermore, the cluster helps in documenting and sharing best practices in their respective thematic area, developing continental framework standards and guidelines for education development for thematic area, provide technical guidance and support to member states, as well as mobilizing technical and financial resources for implementation. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that the Commission is steadfast and forward-looking to working with UNESCO as the United Nations Specialized Agency for Education, which is entrusted to lead and coordinate the Education 2030 agenda, which is also part of the global movement to eradicate poverty through the 17th Sustainable Development Goal by 2030, with the view to transforming African education. I thank you, and I wish to all a successful launch of the education, of the roadmap for the education sustainable development. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ouedraogo. First of all, let me apologize that I referred to you as acting when in fact you are the Director of the Human Resources, Science and Technology from the African Union Commission. We're very pleased that you have been able to show the relevance of ESD to the work of the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. We're very happy to hear your elaboration of the cluster strategy and how the Africa Union intends to work on the different 12 strategic objectives of CESA. And finally, we are going to be inspired by your call for action. ESD, the new ESD framework, is about action. And maybe to introduce you to a specific action point, let me present the video on a sustainability starts with teachers on the work here in South Africa, which we hope will be inspiring to the other regions. Over.
Southern Africa is home to 345 million people. It is a richly textured region with beautiful environments, rich cultures, natural resources, and a youthful population. It has many as yet untapped opportunities for transformation and change towards more sustainable, just societies. The Sustainability Starts with Teachers course builds on 30 years of environment and sustainability education in the SADC region. There is a strong community of practice working on environment and sustainability concerns in education. Drawing on alumni from this network, the Sustainability Starts with Teachers course, implemented by the UNESCO Regional Office for Southern Africa, with Rhodes University and partners Swedest and Sarua, offers a year-long change-orientated learning course to teacher educators in 11 Southern African countries. Each year, the program works with 3 countries, building on an active network for education for sustainable development across the SADC region. For example, in 2019, Botswana, Namibia, and Zimbabwe were part of the program. This year, 2020, Lesotho, South Africa, and Zambia are part of the program. The remaining 5 countries will participate in the course in the next 2 years. The course follows a 5-step action learning framework centered around an ESD change project. Each teacher educator on the course identifies a local community of practice to work with. They choose the focus of the change project aligned with the ESD 2030 focus areas. To start the change project, in-country workshops are held to support participants choose a good change project that is also aligned with the national policy and sustainable development goals, making sure the change project focuses on SDG goal number 4, target 4.7, as well as some of the other SDGs. Following the in-country workshops, participants complete an advanced ESD course at Rose University in South Africa, offered online in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The 2020 online course was supplemented by a webinar series that involved some of the top experts in ESD across the world. A positive approach is taken to engaging teacher educators and teachers in training in engaging with the SDGs, and a special set of SDG cards has been designed to attract teacher educators and teachers in training to work with the SDGs. Teacher educators are supported to think through how to undertake a policy and context review, how to access and use up-to-date information on sustainable development challenges, and how to integrate T-learning or transformative approaches into their practice. They are also encouraged to rethink assessment practice to focus on significant learning in ESD. Finally, teacher educators are supported to evaluate their change projects using a value creation framework for finding value in the change project for themselves, their students, surrounding communities, and their institutions. This is to identify how to scale their change projects for impact. The scaling of ESD practice and sharing of knowledge is made possible by a state-of-the-art platform that carries news of the program, an alumni forum for ongoing engagement, and a copyright-free e-learning library that provides access to UNESCO and the SADC region's ESD materials, free for all teachers across Africa to download on the following website. Together, these change projects are leading ESD policy and practice development across the SADC region and are establishing the basis for demonstrating how to go about mainstreaming ESD into national education systems in ways that put the teacher at the center of transformation.
Thank you very much. This is an example of a regional effort on teachers, making sure that teacher educators are trained on education for sustainable development. We are very pleased, we are very privileged, in fact, just like to have the director of the Western African office. We are very privileged to have Ms. Anne-Therese Ndong-Jata, the director of the UNESCO Multisectoral Office in Nairobi for East Africa. Anne, take it away.
Okay. Thank you so very much, and good afternoon to all the colleagues, Dr. Mahama, my colleague Dimitri, and all the other specialists that have joined us, including the National Commission. Welcome again to the Africa Regional Online Launch of Education for Sustainable Development. The roadmap for the period 2020 to 2030. I have already been introduced. I'm Anne-Therese Ndong-Jata, UNESCO's Regional Director for Eastern Africa in Nairobi. On behalf of UNESCO, I'm pleased to present you today the ESD 2030 roadmap for the next 10 years. The global efforts to strengthen the role of education for sustainable development had started in the 70s, but it gained global traction through Chapter 36 of Agenda 21, adopted at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992. 1992, and the subsequent launch of the UN Decade on Education for Sustainable Development from 2005 to 2014. The UN Decade was followed by the 5 years of Global Action Program, the GAP on ESD, as we have heard, which was led by a group of 97 key partners to reach 37 million learners and 2 million teachers across the world. The launch of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in 2015 brought renewed emphasis on the role of ESD as recognized explicitly in Target 4.7. This globally agreed target aims to ensure by 2030 that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills to promote sustainable development. And now, in 2020, we are facing serious challenges. In the short to medium term, the COVID-19 pandemic, and in the long term, the climate crisis. This is why UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, "We are in a battle for our lives. What we know, what we believe in, and what we do needs to change. What we have learned so far does not prepare us for the challenge. This cannot go on. We must urgently learn to live differently." And this we have heard also spoken by Dr. Mahama and my colleague Dimitri. UNESCO, as the lead UN agency on ESD, is pleased to launch the new global framework on ESD called Education for Sustainable Development towards Achieving the SDGs, or in short, ESD for 2030, as the follow-up to the GAP. In the period of 2020-2030, the ESD for 2030 framework aims to fully integrate ESD and the 17 SDGs into policies, learning environments, capacity building of educators, the empowerment and mobilization of young people, and local level action. And the roadmap we are launching today underlines the plan of action to implement the framework in the next 10 years. Through pursuing the goal and objective of ESD for 2030 in 10 years' time, we aim to create a world in which governments mainstream ESD in their education and sustainable development policies, learners acquire the knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes for sustainable development through a whole institution approach. Educators are well prepared to foster societal transformation for a sustainable future. Youths are strongly encouraged to be the agents of change for sustainable development, and all people in cities and communities are equipped as lifelong learners to take action for sustainability at local level. Let us now dive into the how, and who, because we are challenged by implementation. There are three key features raised in the framework. First, the emphasis on education's role for the achievement of the 17 SDGs. SDGs. UN General Assembly the sustainable SDGs, which invites and tensions in their local, national, and regional contexts. And so, in the new 10 years, that's the 10 years to come, which may be our last window of opportunity to turn our fate around, ESD must focus on the big transformation that is needed for sustainable development and how education can provide relevant interventions. ESD can employ learning content, pedagogy, and learning environment that promotes transformative actions of individual learners. Individual actions are intertwined with structural changes that aims to transform the deep causes of the crises we face today. Moreover, ESD has to respond to the opportunities and challenges brought about by technical advances and reinforce the core values of sustainability. The urgency of this existential crisis calls for stronger leadership of member states. To this end, ESD for 2030 focuses on country initiative, through which countries can address the 5 priority action areas. Engage all concerned stakeholders and advocate and mobilize resources. UNESCO invites all member states to launch your country initiative on ESD for 2030, building on existing work on ESD and creating a should be aligned with UNESCO's global priorities on Africa and gender equality. And a particular emphasis should be made for small island developing states. Now, what should we specifically do specifically to bring individual and societal transformation and country leadership? During the consultations to develop ESD for 2030 framework, ESD stakeholders have called for continued investments around the 5 priority action areas, which had been established for the GAP. These are namely, advancing policy to integrate ESD into education policies and all policies on sustainable development. Number 2, transforming learning environments to apply whole institution approach to ESD, where learners learn what they live and live what they learn. The 3rd, building capacities of educators to develop ESD capacity through pre-service and in-service training of educators. The 4th, empowering and mobilizing youth to create opportunities for young people and engage them as key actors. And for the 5th, accelerating local level actions to develop community action plan to promote individual and societal transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, multi-stakeholder approach is key to this success. Policymakers from local, national, regional levels, from ministries of education, but also ministries of environment and other ministries related to SDGs, as well as cities and communities, need to be involved. Institutional leaders, starting from school headmasters and other leaders of education institutions, to leaders of institutions related to sustainable development, are crucial, as well as learners, parents, and educators. Young people, we always say, hold the key to innovation, and communities are the very ground where transformation can take place in actionable scale. We're still looking at how do we implement? And ladies and gentlemen, we must ask this very important question, and it has been echoed by Dr. Mahama. How can we implement the 5 priority action areas of the ESD for 2030 framework? At the heart of the implementation is country initiatives on ESD for 2030. All UNESCO member states are invited to launch your own country initiative to lead the mainstreaming of ESD in education and sustainable development. I will explain the details in the following slide. Secondly, the new framework will encourage strong partnerships and collaboration through ESD for 2030 network, ESDnet, at global and regional levels, which will invite the representatives of country initiatives and other ESD actors from education and sustainable development communities. Communication and advocacy efforts, including the UNESCO Japan ESD Prize, will be strengthened. Evidence-informed implementation of the framework by tracking issues and trends in education and sustainable development, and mobilizing resources through making full use of the intersectoral, multidisciplinary nature of UNESCO, as well as its diverse partners, should be further strengthened, and various efforts to monitor the progress will be pursued with the aim of achieving SDG 4.7 by 2030. Regarding country initiatives, we must and we should build on ongoing efforts on ESD as well as possible new efforts. It is a big basket for ESD efforts, and multi-stakeholders, both from education and sustainable development sectors, who are willing to join hands to work together should be mobilized. It should become an open and inclusive network of activities and actors. For example, any passionate teacher or any enthusiastic mayor should be able to join and work in a decentralized, voluntary, and collaborative way with a working group that supports them. The details of the country initiative and how to prepare and launch is found in the template available in the link. UNESCO will provide technical support to help the countries to organize preparatory multi-stakeholder workshops, and will also provide the detailed workshop materials and videos to help you kick off the preparation with your stakeholders in the country. Especially, there's a small amount of seed funding available for a number of developing countries in the region to help organize these workshops, thanks to the kind support of the Japanese Funds in Trust. But let's take note that the first group of countries who start this preparation for country initiative between now and April next year will be offered a chance to prominently showcase their country example at the high-level ministerial roundtable and plenary sessions at UNESCO World Conference on ESD in May. So it's a question of call for action. So you start now and you gain, the visibility and recognition of the work you do. After this launch event, there will be a regional technical workshop organized on a date to be arranged and discussed, and the details would also be provided. In the meantime, please contact UNESCO regional offices to express interest to participate in country initiative. We have quite a number of the directors here on call, and depending on where you are, you can really just be able to contact the office. So on this note, what next? We should ask, after the launch event today, there will be a regional technical workshop to discuss the country initiative. The dates would be provided later. And then each country will organize country-level preparatory workshop with the support of UNESCO. When prepared, countries will submit the country initiative plan and be showcased, as I said earlier, at the conference, which will be held from the 17th to the 19th May in Berlin, Germany, which is likely to be an online event should the situation continues as we know it today. To follow up from Berlin, 1 week after will be a regional technical meeting on the action plans, as well as physical meeting planned back-to-back to regional SDG 4 meetings until 2022. From 2023, every 2 years, a global ESD net meeting is planned to exchange and collaborate on ESD for 2030, including a midterm review in 2025 and a final review in 2030. I really would want to say the roadmap is quite clear, and it leaves nothing, no opening for us not to act now. I thank you for your kind attention, and God bless.
Much, Andres. We really are very privileged that you have been able to elaborate and explain the roadmap, and I hope by now it's clear how we will proceed from the different countries. And maybe to give us more inspiration, without further ado, I would like to hand over the moderation to my colleague Hilaire Maputo, who is the head of the education unit in our regional office in Cameroon. Hilaire, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Madame Moderator. Merci beaucoup, ma chère Caroline.
Thank you, dear Caroline. Good afternoon, dear participants. This is now the third part of our agenda, devoted to the presentations by the different panelists, to be followed by a discussion. We have 6 panelists in all, whom I'm going to introduce briefly. We have Catherine Matara, Kenya, who will make a presentation on the implementation of the educational policy for sustainable development in Kenya. Then we will hear from Hubert Tefi from Cameroon, who's an engineer in the petroleum industry. He's going to speak about the Family Green Corporation's commitment to the attainment of the SDGs through education. That presentation will be followed by one by Dr. Adel Barasatiti, who will speak about the role of African regional economic communities in implementing education for sustainable development for the year to 2030. Then it will be up to Maria Dolores Monteiro, Director of Research and Planning and Cooperation of Cabo Verde. I'll make a presentation on education for sustainable development, challenges and prospects in Cabo Verde. Then we'll hear from Dr. Sima Ibudro, who's in charge of policy research and programs, who's an advisor for educational development in Nigeria. He will speak about the promotion of education and sustainable development to create a solid political framework for Nigeria. Then we will hear from Alex Kalimba, an associate professor for environmental education and education for sustainable development in the University of Namibia. Professor Kaimba will speak to us about education and sustainable development in Namibia. Some brief ideas as to the role of authorities. So each panelist will only have 5 minutes, and each panelist will be asked to answer the 3 questions. 1, what have been the accomplishments in implementing ESD in their country, referring, of course, to the 5 priority fields presented by a director from Nairobi. The second question is, what are the future plans or commitments for the implementation of EDS for 2030, referring to the 5 priority fields of action? And then the last question is, how do the panelists see the role of education and sustainable development in the global efforts made for SDG 4 and other relevant SDGs? So let me first of all give the floor to the first panelist, Katerina Matara, who's going to present the implementation of EDS in Kenya. Madam Matara, you have 5 minutes for your presentation. Thank you. You have the floor.
My name is Katerina Matara from Ministry of Education, Kenya. I'm going to take you through the various achievements that Kenya has achieved since the implementation of the ESD in 2017. Next slide, please. So some of the achievements we have, we developed the policy and launched in 2017. We have the IEC materials developed for dissemination. We have a training guide which we use to train teachers on ESD. We have an action plan which has enabled us to implement several things on ESD. Then we've managed to train a number of teachers, about 1,000 teachers on ESD. And with that, then we've been able to establish ESD model centers across the 47 counties in the country, which has really changed most of the learning environments where this has been implemented. Next slide. We have also managed to train regional managers, that is the education managers, that is the regional coordinators of education, county coordinators, county directors of education on ESD. Then we have ESD focal points across the 47 counties who help us to implement ESD right at the ground level. Then Kenya has also been able to host several ESD regional conferences. We also have participated in several GAP meetings, and we've been able to carry out monitoring of ESD model centers in 3 counties, that is Machakos, Nairobi, and Kiambu. And we want to report that ESD indeed has transformed many learning environments through the various initiatives. Next slide. Then what are the lessons learned after implementation of ESD? There is a lot of emphasis on the environmental pillar as opposed to social and economic. We still are lacking capacity on training on ESD, much as we've undertaken part of it, but we still need a lot of training for teachers and even the community. We also have a little research innovation between ESD and the industrial needs of the country. We also need to map out partnerships and the ESD stakeholders to avoid duplication of activities in the field. Next slide. Again, we have limited resources to upscale implementation of ESD. We also need to use ICT to enhance ESD. That has been notably very minimal. We need also to upscale monitoring and evaluation. There's also an inadequate ESD, especially at the informal and non-formal levels. And also we need to integrate ESD in the teacher pre-service, in-service training. Next slide. However, we have several opportunities. We have the ESD policy in place. We have a lot of goodwill from various stakeholders. We need also to tap on CBC. We have the model centers, which will act as will showcase to the other schools. We have technical capacity having been built in the headquarters and also across the 47 counties through the 47 focal points or persons. We also have the IEC materials and training guide developed. Next slide. Then we have also collaboration and partnership through UNESCO Region Office. We have the government of Japan. We have Mashav, which is an Israeli agency. We have NATCOM. We have the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. We have Kenya Education Management Institutes. We also have the local universities. Next slide. And NGOs. We have Semastea, which is a teacher training center. We have the World Wide Fund. We have the Wildlife Clubs of Kenya. We have the African Endangered Wildlife Association. And we also have the Kenya Organization of Environmental Education. These partners have been very supportive in implementing various initiatives. Then we have a lot of what are our next steps? We need support to upscale capacity building for educators and also curriculum developers. Then we need to mainstream ESD in the basic education curriculum. We need also to upscale the transformation of learning environments, which is one of the pillars of ESD. Then we need also to implement the ESD guidelines for the university sector. And we need to incorporate ESD within the school activities. Then we need to develop an ideal monitoring framework, which will assist in tracking the gains that we have in ESD. And then there is need to integrate ICT in ESD, especially during this time where e-learning has been very helpful because of the COVID. Thank you very much, asante sana, and we really appreciate our partners and UNESCO for even giving us an opportunity to make this presentation. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam Matara. Thank you for sharing your experience, which is very interesting. And that can really serve as inspiration for many other countries. And thank you for sticking to the 5 minutes you were given. So without further ado, let me give the floor to the second panelist, Liberté Dugois, from Cameroon, who's an engineer in the petroleum industry. He's going to speak about the commitment of the Family Green Corporation and the achievement of SDGs for education. You have the floor.
Monsieur Dugois.
Mr. Dugois. Perhaps there's a technical problem, but pending solving that. Oh, yeah. Oh, there he is. Are you there, sir? Mr. Chigua, are you there? Yes, I am. Go ahead then. I'm here. You've got 5 minutes for your presentation. Thank you. I'm Hubert Chigua. I'm the chairman of the Family Green Corporation from Cameroon. I'm going to speak about the commitment of our organization to the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals through education. In Cameroon, with the support of its partners, please go on to the next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Previous, please. Previous slide.
Actually, the previous slide is what we want.
Please, the first slide. Yeah. Okay. C'est bon, Monsieur Tuga?
Non, c'est pas bon. Le premier slide.
One slide before, please. One slide up.
The first slide, please.
Very first slide, please.
Okay.
Okay, c'est bon.
Fine. We've got it.
Okay, je disais tantôt que nous allons vous parler de la...
So we speak about our organization's commitment with the support of UNESCO and its partners has been supporting the implementation of SDG 4. The government thus revised its curricula in order to give special emphasis to education and sustainable development and education for world citizenship. In 2018, new disciplines were created in primary education, that is sciences and technology. And a big focus was given to sustainable development and particularly the environment. In secondary education, the fight against the climate change and pollution and the protection of the environment, as well as techniques for transformation and recycling of waste and the reuse and the use of renewable energies were all added to the curriculum. Next slide, please. Next.
Next.
Est-ce qu'il y a un souci,
C'est dans
monsieur?
cette lancée que la FGC promeut. Non, c'est Moyo qui contrôle.
OK.
Previous slide, previous slide, previous slide.
Allez un peu plus vite,
Dans cette
monsieur.
lancée que la Family Green Corporation.
The Family Green Corporation is promoting, along with different partners, concrete and theoretical actions of education in schools, training centers, and in the communities. Next slide, please. Step it up. So therefore, we introduced several community projects in order to involve the young people during the long holidays, and also projects aimed. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm the third slide here. Next slide. One more, please. One more. Next slide. This project is called GEV, Procobi. To train the people on the use of salvinia, which is a plant that is polluting the water in Lake Osa. The idea is to fight against unemployment, rural exodus, and global warming, and to help sustainable development by taking account of certain fields of action. That is sustainable development with the. Sorry, the sound is unused. The interpreter can't make any use of the sound that he's getting for the time being. Oh, in order to integrate new mechanisms to encourage learners and to strengthen and build the capacity of the trainers and the teachers, the creation of practical and theoretical workshops. So this training in sustainable development and in environmental protection, as well as the empowerment and mobilization of young people by creating practical training organizations in order to help promote job creation, and funded by the acceleration of solutions when it comes to local assistance. We have the assistance by local organizations to help young people implement their ideas regarding ESD, and to facilitate their access to online training programs, as well as to the MOOCs on environmental protection. In the perspective of our group, we have advocacy in order to encourage the factoring in of ESD in the curricula, as well as training on the green economy and the circular economy, and to create teachers training workshops for sustainable development in order to train around 10,000 young people in entrepreneuriat and on the protection of the environment. In this logic, we initiated a project to be young and to be an entrepreneur in order to train 10,000 young people over the next 10 years. The first edition of this project will be launched next March in Jombe Tenga. It will bring together young people from 7 Cameroonese cities. Then we think that the future of our nation will be based on its educational system. Education for sustainable development is the solution for a sustainable future.
And we'll also be presenting the different partners who are supporting us in this, including UNESCO, UNEP, MINJEC, and local authorities, together with youth associations. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you, Mr. Chiga, for this excellent initiative, bringing together young people and CSOs to help with education for sustainable development. Right, without further ado, we'll give the floor to Dr. Adel Barasa Titi, who is an education and sustainable development expert, who will be presenting the role of African economic and regional communities in implementation of ESD for 2030. You have the floor, sir.
Good evening, colleagues, delegates. I'm happy and thank UNESCO for giving me this opportunity to be part of this regional launch. I'll talk about the role of African regional centers of expertise in implementing ESD for 2030. I want just to explain what regional centers of expertise are. These are multi-stakeholder initiatives, which was started by United Nations University, where I worked as a research fellow from 2011 up to 2015. So I've been particularly involved in the African RCs, in their implementation and formation for the last 7 years. An RC is basically a network of existing formal, non-formal, and informal organizations that come together to address sustainable development issues. So they bring together very many partners from government, from universities, from schools, etc. So I'll highlight some of the key features of the RCs that have also been part of the efforts to implement the GAP initiative. One of them is Search for Sustainable Development Solutions, most of the African RCs. I need also to highlight here that we have 175 regional centers of expertise globally, which are normally coordinated by United Nations University in Tokyo, sponsored by Ministry of Environment, Japan. In Africa, we have 38, and some number of countries are involved. So a number of efforts have been done in terms of success. So I'll highlight some of them. One, in terms of accelerating search for sustainable solution at the local level, most of the RCs in Africa are hosted by universities, and there's a lot of research work that goes on. And basically, the idea is to share some of the research findings and also translate them into solutions that can be used at the local level. So there's been a lot in that. Every year we have RC award projects that African RCs participate. And for example, there's a call for nomination at Tokyo. And through this, there's a lot of sharing of what happens in the RCs. There's also transforming learning and training environments. There's a lot that has happened, especially within the universities. A number of universities have turned green. They have also tried to reorient their curriculum. They have gone forward to only assist universities, but also to go at the local level. Advancing policy through ESD. There's been a number of initiatives also there by RCs, particularly in Nigeria, where you have RCs like RCMINA, where we have what we call policy dialogue, engaging policymakers and also researchers. So because turning policies into practice is normally a huge challenge. There's been also building of capacities of educators and trainers. Every year, African RCs have the continental meeting. So I've been able to participate in the last 7 of them. This year, they had an online continental meeting, which was hosted by RCMINA. And through those meetings, there's normally capacity building for the educators and trainers. A number of RCs have come up with courses that are tailored to normally build capacities for educators and trainers. Empowering and mobilizing youth. Most RCs have a youth group section, which also links to the global initiative of the youth group. And as we speak now, there's plans to have a youth conference online, also organized by RC Kano. So there's a lot that has happened in that area. Of course, there's a number of success stories, which I can't highlight in this short period, but one good example, of course, when we talk about ESD, we have to look at all the SDGs. So a good example is RC KwaZulu-Natal that has focused on water, and water is a very important issue. So the RC has been involved in monitoring water. There's a lot that has happened there, so I don't have to go to the details, but working with the local communities has improved relationship between local community and the water service provider. We have other RCs that also engage. For example, I'm speaking from Kakamega now, so we have RC Kakamega that is also involved in a lot of research. I need to highlight some of the key challenges that are faced RCs that will also face them as they engage in the ESD for 2030. One of these is the ambulance measure of ESD and SDGs, because RCs will bring in many stakeholders. So most of members will have different interpretations of what ESD is and SDGs is. So there's that tensions and contradictions. Whereas it's a challenge, it's also an opportunity in itself because people bring in different interpretations. And we know that sustainable development issues don't require just one solution. There's also what you call heterogeneity of RCs in Africa. So the RCs, of course, are different. That heterogeneity is a key challenge, but it's also an opportunity in itself where RCs bring in different projects, different focus, because RCs with the particular region, they have different issue arrangements. Because RCs bring together very many stakeholders, different people. We find that managing the knowledge is a big issue. So knowledge management is a big issue. And of course, we know that there's a lot of knowledge out there. Another challenge is providing adequate resources. So this is a key challenge for African RCs, whereby the resources, especially financial and finance and human. So this is a huge challenge for many of the networks of RCs. And lastly, there's lack of political will. Many RCs in Africa have not engaged the politicians wholly, but of course, we have a few that have done so well. For example, in Abuja, we had an RC meeting that engaged the governor. And of course, this year, they also engaged the first lady of the RC MENA, of the state there. So, but the lack of political will why artists need to engage the politicians has not been so well. So we need to also look at that. So I need to highlight the way forward, what can be done to implement, of course, the 2030 agenda. So there's need to commit concrete activities to streamline ESD within the 2030 agenda. So we have so many activities, but they need to that commitment. And of course, there's need to mobilize diverse partnerships and networks around ESD for 2030. Whereas RCs are well placed to do that, there are always challenges, especially where we have the focus leadership to do that mobilization. There's need to also mobilize existing funding mechanisms in education. Some artists have done well to mobilize funding mechanisms within the business sector, but others have not done so well. Some will just rely on government, but there's need to mobilize most of these funding mechanisms to see what can be done about the SDGs and ESD activities. There's also artists need to promote ESD as a key enabler of all SDGs. Whereas we are looking at the SDG on ESD, we also have other SDGs that need to be engaged. So, of course, thank you.
Okay, merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Atiti, for presenting and sharing all this knowledge on regional expertise centers. I think that many of us are not familiar with these. And it would be a fine thing to get that information circulating within our networks. Thank you very much. We have very little time left, and I'll ask the remaining panelists all to strictly respect the 5-minute time slots that they have. So let me give the floor to Shima Ubuja, Policy and Program Research Director in Nigeria. He will be presenting us promotion of sustainable development, engaging a solid policy framework. You have the floor, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Dr. Chima Ebujo from the Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council. I'm a policy and program officer at the institution. Just to share briefly on what Nigeria has been able to do so far in respect to the ESDs. Our effort in Nigeria in respect to that started quite in 2010 following the UN Decade of Action, when we thought of expanding our curriculum development structure so that the issues, emerging issues like the ESD can be properly accommodated in our school curriculum to make it possible for learners across the nation to benefit, from sustainable living programs that we are designing. And good enough, we're able to achieve that. And by 2012, in Nigeria, we mainstreamed ESD contents into our basic education curriculum across the nation, following our bottom-up policy development approach, which gave opportunity for all states across the nation, the 36 states, and the Federal Capital Territory to be involved in the implementation process. So at the moment, basically in Nigeria, we have the ESDs mainstreamed in basic education curriculum across board. And that is a big achievement for us as a nation. And as a result, we also had to do some critical training program for teachers across the nation, though not much because there is that low capacity in terms of funding. We've made provision for master trainers across the states of the Federation. Expectation was that these master trainers will go ahead to train the other teachers, but in the long run, we had 1,443 teachers trained and policy makers, because the policy makers are expected to guide the teachers in the curriculum implementation process. We're able to do that in 2013, 2014. But again, going forward in 2015, we saw the need to expand the content and make it much more flexible and make it much more locally related to the issues that are affecting the local content. Consequently, we will now in 2018, we were able to develop a curriculum on education and emergency. It's much expanded, bringing to focus all issues of sustainable development, bringing to focus all issues of environmental conservation, bringing to focus issues of climate change, bringing to focus issues of disaster risk reduction. And these are currently being mainstreamed also at the basic education level. Going forward in our plans for the future, our intention is to, because the number of teachers trained is still not enough, that is very minimal looking at the population of Nigeria. So we need to provide more training for the teachers so that we get more teachers trained on the implementation of this curriculum content, because obviously the issues of ESD are very quite different. You don't implement it like, they're very different. You don't implement it like you do implementation in other contents if you want to have the expected result. So these are our plans for the next years ahead, to bring, to expand the teacher training program, train more teachers, build their capacity, enable them to implement the school curriculum content in a way that the learners will be able to bring about transformation in their communities. And again, because so far we've been able to maintain the basic education level, we've not done that at the senior secondary education level. And that is, we're also having future plans towards that direction to make sure that this content, the ESD elements, are introduced in an expanded form at the senior secondary education level to enable more students to have opportunity to learn the ESD skills and then acquire relevant skills and values for sustainable development. At the moment, we are nurturing a very strong collaboration with the Office of the Senior Special Assistant on Sustainable Development Goals in Nigeria. And our intention is to expand the focus of the ESD so that it can incorporate other aspects of the SDGs for proper implementation at the school level. Our intention is to get more learners acquire these skills and then bring about transformation in the school system. There is also the issue of bringing about transformation of our learning environment. We've not been able to do that due to issues of capacity and funding. There are plans on ground. We are collaborating with other sister agencies in Nigeria so that we can have opportunity to work together to create model schools where ESD environment, where the school environment is transformed to make learning of the sustainable education programs much more related to the local environment. These are our plans and our targets. There is also the issue of our policy, expanding the policy framework in Nigeria so that the issue of ESD can be much more encompassing in other areas. We are working collaboratively with many partners, the National Emergency Management Agency. We're working with national and international non-governmental organizations. We're also engaging with citizens of the country to ensure there is collaboration and synergy towards improving, particularly the implementation of the school curriculum content at the school level, giving teachers adequate training so that they can acquire the needed pedagogy, the needed skills, and the needed assessment strategies for the implementation of the ESD. These are our plans in the near future. We're looking forward to getting this achieved. We're also looking forward to working collaboratively with UNESCO here in Nigeria, even globally, so that in the long run, there will be that synergy for us as a country towards achieving certain set objectives in respect to the sustainable education program in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Sir? For your presentation. And we certainly encourage you to continue the efforts you are already making. And you have our very best wishes for your future initiatives. We will remain very attentive to these, and the message will certainly be passed along to the Nigeria Bureau. Now let me give the floor to Maria de Lourdes Monteiro, who is Director for Planning and Studies in Cape Verde. and she'll be presenting education for sustainable development, challenges and perspectives. The case of Cape Verde. You have the floor, madam. Good afternoon. I hope that you can all hear me. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation. Thank you. And we're going to try now to make a very brief communication with the time that has been earmarked to us to say that in Cape Verde, we had approval in 2017 of this resolution 8015/2017, which approves a charter for education policy. This charter essentially basically says the future will only be possible through education. And it would have to be education able to contribute to well-being and to sustainable development initiatives, which have to be a substantial challenge to be met in our educational system. This is why we have laid forth on the national level a strategic plan for education, which is meant to be coming to grips with sustainable development goals, and also to make it aligned with our general objectives in this area. So if you can show me the next slide, please. In relation to our educational system, we have been working on basic education, obligatory school, where we have people have to go to school for 8 years. That's an obligation. And we have 2 4-year cycles within those 8 years. These are pluridisciplinary studies, which are broken down into specific areas where we work on subjects which could include sustainable development education. Working on these subjects has a lot to do with the profile of the different students who are involved in primary education and who basically have to have some essential skills. For instance, dealing with sustainable education and also with the environment.
With respect to the main projects that we are carrying out, the sound just went off. We have several projects. For example, the protection of the biodiversity of water and of soils. All of these projects are being carried out on the basis of the themes, and there are also specific training programs for teachers, as well as awareness raising in the educational community. When it comes to the financing of these projects, we have several partners, including UNESCO, Luxembourg, and also the Ministry of the Environment of our country. Next slide, please. Very well. Here are some pictures of the projects that we're working on in our different schools. You can just run through the different photos, different projects we're carrying out on the basis of the subjects that I put forth. In terms of the challenges now, given the pandemic we're living through, we have several challenges to the continuity of these projects, but also many alternatives were enacted because of the current situation. For example, awareness raising in the educational community. We asked the teachers to convince their parents to carry out these garden projects at home. We think that we have to make education ever more inclusive, work on education for citizenship and human rights, gender equality, and others. We also think that the major skills needed by our students will help us achieve an ever more sustainable future. We think that counting on education will help us to reduce and eradicate poverty. That's one of the Sustainable Development Goals. We think that all of these policies must necessarily require proper training for our teachers. We already have a project on clean energy, which should bring solar panels to our schools in the countryside. We also have a partnership, the project in partnership between the Ministry of Education and the water and sanitation companies for the canalization of water around our schools. All of our schools have water, but the majority doesn't have running water in plumbing. So we think that we have to look at goal 17 of the SDGs and promote, encourage students to cooperate in group work. We always keep in mind the essential milestones, the essential dates of the program, and we're working hand in hand with our schools to that end. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you, Madam Montero, for the experience, for the presentation of your interesting experience in Cabo Verde, which I think will serve as an inspiration for many other countries. Before we go on to the last presentation, let me simply remind the panelists that given the fact that we're short on time, we can't have questions and answers afterwards. But let me ask the panelists to look at question and answers on their screens, and then they can provide written answers to the questions asked of them. Let me give the floor to Alex Kajiba, Associate Professor in Environmental and Sustainable Development Education at the University of Namibia. He will present ESD in Namibia, an abridged reflection on achievements, roles, and future plans. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, colleagues from the Education for Sustainable Development sector. My name is actually presented there, Professor on Education for Sustainable Development at the university, and I work closely with the government of Namibia in the effort to implement education for sustainability. And you go to the next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, so that's actually the outline of the presentation. We go to the next one. Next slide, please. In terms of the achievement in ESD implementation in Namibia in relation to policy, these are some of the important achievements that we have highlighted. Is the policy actually that is developed, a policy on education for sustainable development, which was signed by two ministries of education and Ministry of the Environment. And of course, there's also a recognition of ESD in Namibian policies is one of the, ESD is one of the cross-cutting issue in addressing sustainable development. And we also have a vibrant ESA node in Namibia, which participate internationally in a number of regional projects. And the ESD is actually contained in career subjects at school level, and there's a huge scope for developing ESD within the school grounds and also the school management. It's actually increasing. There's a recognition of the role that the TVET can play in ESD, and of course the higher education sector. I didn't see the higher education sector is actually, we see that it's actually driving towards a key concept of sustainability like resilience and also the employability skills, which are actually connected to the ESD navigation skills. And then the future plans and commitments, we are actually now at the moment as a part of the future process of setting up an institutional-wide task force to support the implementation of ESD is underway. So the task force will be responsible for development of action plan with specific sectors, specific activities, timelines, and budget required by each stakeholder to implement sector-specific ESD. Move on to the next one. Each institution has been, through that policy, has been asked to set up an ESD unit, and each stakeholder has to present an annual institutional sectoral report on ESD programs that is part of the policy. And the role of the ESD in the overall effort made to SDG, Sustainable Development 4 and other ESD, other SDGs. The national ESD policy is aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and ESD is to play an important role. This national policy, which we have set up, which we are implementing now, is to implement target 4.7 of the SDGs on quality education, and to ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development. We move to the next one. The policy is going to promote, amongst others, to promote sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace, prevention of violence, and strengthening political will, and appreciation of the cultural diversity and the culture's contribution to sustainable development. And of course, also to promote global citizenship education, which are at the core of SDG 4, target 4.7. So actually that's a very short presentation that I've prepared. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur
Thank you very much,
Alex. Merci beaucoup pour cette présentation de l'expérience
presentation of the experience from Namibia. Dear participants,
nous avons tous
we have
suivi
all followed the different and excellent presentations. We would have liked to have a much more interactive discussion after these nice presentations, but unfortunately, we are out of time. We asked the panelists to answer the questions asked to them in writing under questions and answers. So without further ado, let me give the floor back to my colleague, Carolina, for the rest of the meeting. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, and thanks to all the panelists for their contributions. Thank you.
To moderate such a very rich panel. As we can see, our region has a lot of experience in policies and in working together with other stakeholders. And as you said, we are lacking time. And so without further ado, I would like to hand over our closing remarks to Lamin, who's the acting director of our regional office in Abuja, as well as the head of education. Lamin?
Yes, Caroline, can you hear me?
Wait, yes.
Okay. Merci beaucoup, Caroline. Merci, cher Hilaire, pour...
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Hilaire, for moderating the meeting.
For the quality of the presentation, quality and diversity of the presentations. So I'm here to deliver the closing remarks. First and foremost, let me thank my colleague, Caroline, and her team for organizing this webinar. I know they have been very active, working tirelessly round the clock with colleagues from other regions in Africa. So thank you, Caroline, and thanks to your team. I think what I would say is that it has been 1.5 hours of quality and very insightful conversation that I have heard, that we all have heard. This launch would not have been successful without the rich array of perspectives, quality content, and cross-fertilization of ideas that you have shared. And those ideas relating to both policies, systems, but also practices on education for sustainable development. You shared the achievements, the future plans, but also your commitments and the role that education for sustainable development is going to play overall in the effort of reaching, the SDG 4 targets and beyond other SDGs. Talking about SDG 4, I remember I heard Anne-Therese mentioning, target 4.7, which is very important. And what we have heard so far, make us very confident about the fact that we are on the right track. The many good work going on in the different countries, we have listened to experiences from Cameroon, from Cabo Verde, from Kenya, Nairobi, Namibia, and Nigeria. All that show that member states are working relentlessly in ensuring that education for sustainable development is part of their program, part of people's daily lives, in fact. And I think that most of it, as we have heard, is about building the capacities, not only for students who are in formal schools, but also targeting people that are part of the lifelong learning initiative, because we want to make sure that we provide those opportunities to everybody, and that we leave no one behind. So that has been also recorded from what we have experienced today. I think the experiences and best practices that you share today will serve as an evaluation to the work that we are doing at the country levels, but also at the regional levels, and that it will reveal, what we are doing well, but also what we are not doing well, and that we will learn, reflect, and adjust, our strategies, our policies, our practices regarding, the implementation of education for sustainable development in line with the SDG, with the 2030 agenda, but also CESA 2025. So let me tell you that what we have heard is also about transformative pedagogies, how we are going to do things differently than what we did it in the past, to improve both the acquisition of skills, knowledge, but the way we live in our societies, the way we live in this global world now, how we are going to contribute to making it peaceful, living together in smart cities. So that's very important. Finally, I cannot conclude on my closing remarks without commending again and congratulating all my colleagues. I would like to recognize the other directors, my brother Dimitri, who made an excellent introduction. He really paved the way for us. Anne-Therese, as usual, with all her excellent facilitation skills, her vast knowledge of Africa, of the program, the education program in general, you have made a lot of difference. And as I said before, also to thank Caroline, my colleague, her team, all the presenters today. And by the way, I did not introduce myself. Je m'appelle Mamadou Lamine Sow. Je suis chargé du bureau.
In charge of the UNESCO Regional Bureau Office in Abuja. which covers 8 countries of the region. And I would really like to thank Caroline because she invited us to a workshop last November in Johannesburg. And it was really an excellent opportunity for us. When we got home, we really began to get down to work to implement the educational programs for global citizenship and for sustainable development in our region. We have examples which are coming to life in Nigeria, but also in other countries like Guinea, that's in the process of reforming its curriculum for education for citizenship. And that fits in with our program for today. Let me conclude with those words and thank you very much. And wish you a happy day, the rest of the day. Caroline, you have the floor. Thank you.
To you, and maybe just like a final word, the materials, the documents, my colleague Bon from HQ has shared that. So you will have access to that. And I think we will, through this link, we will also make possible, make accessible the different presentations. So we're very happy that we have had this chance to have a start discussion on the new ESD framework. We have more than 200 participants, and the idea is after we will have a more technical meeting and you will hear from the different offices. Before I close, as usual, we have been very privileged to have the support and partnership of our colleagues from HQ. As Lamin said, this meeting could not have been possible without the joint collaboration of our colleagues from Paris, from Yaoundé, from Abuja, from Dakar, from Cameroon, and most especially from our technical team here in Harare. And finally, this communication in English, Portuguese, and French would not have been possible without the support of our interpreters from Paris. Thank you very much, and please keep safe and healthy. Thank you very much. Merci e obrigada. Merci. We leave. Now we're done. Thank you. I should have told them.
Merci, Caroline.